Okay, good morning everyone. I hope you can all see the screen fine, and welcome to this latest, the 7th online Rex that we've delivered. I don't know how many Rexes we've done now. I think it's about 30 or something, but it's been a program that we've been really pleased to have developed. It's one that has been built and continually is being built following really the Kensei model of Japan, where we're A, receiving lots and lots of feedback, and B, we're continually going through a process of, well, different levels of refinement. So with this one, I've actually spent a lot of time over the intra-Rex period, particularly the last month, to change a lot and to develop a whole lot of new materials. So hopefully that'll all make life a bit easier for you and make it easier so that you can get to do what you actually want to do, which is to plan your farm and plan your lives a bit better. So let's get into that. Oops, wrong button. There we go. So first of all, where am I from? I'm from a place called Australia, which is its current name, and in the state of Victoria, which for the longest period has been what's known as Dja Dja Wurrung country, or part of the Dja Dja Wurrung nation, which is one of the larger nations here in Victoria, what is now known as Victoria. This part of the world has a pretty mild climate, pretty reasonable rainfall, although it does suffer, like so much of Australia, from quite variable rainfall patterns. It also has, actually I pressed the wrong button there. It also has, whoops, there we go, just get to where I want it to go. It has a pretty extreme temperatures, as does a lot of Australia, from being quite hot to, I would say, moderately cold when you compare it to places like Northern Europe and so on. I've been too fast, hang on. Oops, the thing's not working for me. Go back. Don't you hate it when it does that? There we go. Sorry, I'll just stick with it. And we also have a wide variety of agriculture, and this is reflected as in a number of places around Australia in the original traditional owners in this part of the world, and similar with the southwest of Western Australia, where we have a fairly large contingent of people joining this Rex, that the peoples who lived off those landscapes were quite significant in their stature. And that was a reflection of the broadness and diversity and quality and nutrient density of the diets that they had, because there was just such a wide variety of foods, including a lot that are available from aquatic ecosystems, which improve nourishment considerably. So bit large to today, Victoria has the highest value of output of agriculture in the whole of Australia, even though it's the second smallest state. And that's partly a function of climate, partly a function of facility, and partly a function of diversity. Very wide diversity of landscapes and geologies and soil types and so on. And with the relatively moderate climate equals a fairly significant amount of production. I'll just go back to the slideshow, seeing I prepared it. Regrarians was developed in 2013 as a brand, after a few years of operating outside of that brand. My background is from agriculture. I grew up on a farm outside of Bendigo with my maternal grandparents after my father was killed in the Vietnam War when I was an infant. And so my mother, who was only 21, just turned 21, we stayed and lived on my grandparents' farm, which in itself was reflective of a lot of farms in this region. And at that time, a very mixed farm, so a whole range of different production systems. take us forward to now, where we've got to, and Danielle Nierenberg has done a pretty good job, I think, of describing what we do, that we have got to the point where we're a do-it-yourself farm planning. We deliver farm planning programs which are pretty well DIY. We very rarely do consultations now, pretty well directing everyone through the workplace platform, and indeed the REX program and the Planner membership that so many of you are a part of. The Regrarians workplace has been a real boon for us. We've now got over 3,100 members. It allows us to have a really strong peer-to-peer professional development platform. It's a Facebook product, the workplace platform, and it works really, really well. It's intuitive, and that's one of the reasons why all of Facebook's products are so successful and have such wide adoption, regardless of what you think about Facebook, and that's a whole other topic. This particular platform was developed by Facebook for Facebook as their internal internet way back in the day, and then they decided to then turn it into an intranet for Facebook, interface-based intranet for companies. And so we're on the Workplace for Good program, which means that as a qualifying non-profit, and we had to go through quite a few hoops and third-party assessments to be so, that we get this platform for free. And I'll talk more about that later. But it is a highly intuitive platform. It also carries through that, and some of you may not know this, Facebook has, for myself and other forms of social media, have largely been usurped in my use of the socials by the workplace. So the workplace is now my social personally. I don't expect it necessarily to be yours, but it can be. There's a pretty vibrant crowd in here, and with the apps that are available, it certainly makes it a lot more accessible to interact with this professional development network that we've developed. Other parts of Regrarians, my wife Lisa Heenan and our eldest daughter Isabella Doherty produced this film over a number of years and released it in 2015, which that year it qualified for the Academy Awards, and then in the couple of years to follow won a whole suite of awards all over the world, and we're very proud of it. And it's still a film of high currency. It's one of those pieces that certainly is timeless. So if you have a chance, check it out on polyfaces.com. The other thing that's happened in the last year, in fact, we're 1 year and 3 days old, is the Creamtown Enterprise. Our children, as so many people around the world, lost their jobs when the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, hit us in 2013, and last year in 2020, and with that, the opportunity arose to take over this place, and so our 3 children, Pearl, Zane, and Isabella, formed a company, and Regrarians leases this property and then sublets it to Creamtown, and they've all got jobs, and they've increased the revenue of this, what was a cafe here before, by about 2/3, and are employing 15 people, including themselves. So it's a really great place, and it means that too we can showcase a lot of the producers like yourselves, and artists, creatives, to this community and beyond, for anyone who is lucky enough to be able to get out and about and come and see us. So that's where I am here. I'm in one of the spare rooms here, and I've got the flour mill behind me, which I mill different flours to, because I get in the kitchen as well when I have a bit of time, and help do some prep and whatnot, having been a chef myself 30 years ago plus in a former life. The other product that we have is the Rigorians Handbook, which is a very intensive piece. Writ large to that is the last year it's taken. We're just about ready for the next chapters to be launched. It's taken over a year for us to finish the soils chapter, which is over 400, and I think it's 450 pages now, and it's chock-a-block. So any of you who have been able to check out the download, or been able to download the chapters that we've produced so far, would sort of see that there's a lot of detail, and Andrew Jeeves does an amazing job with all of these incredible illustrations, which make it so much easier for people to understand and navigate the breathtaking complexity that goes with managing agroecological ecosystems. Over the last year in particular, but before that as well, but particularly in 2021, we've developed a program for having others collaborate with us. With that, what that means is that those people or those organisations come in and use the Regrarians workplace as their workplace to collaborate with or to liaise with their networks, whilst being part of the bigger room that we've developed. So 3LM network is one of those. There's, I think, about 400 people from the 3LM network who are a holistic management network within the Savoury Institute hub program, and they predominantly in Erie, Ireland, and in the UK. We also have more lately is the Jefferson Centre for Holistic Management in mostly on the west coast of the United States. There's a few people outside of that area as well, and they are as well a hub of the Savoury Institute. And then we have AgroAssessor, who work in the south of France and across Spain and North Africa, and they are an agronomy, an organic agronomy organisation. They've got about 20 or 30 different agronomists on their team, and they do an amazing job. And we've worked with them over the years, and they're Regrarians partners in Iberia. And then Smart Soil have come along more recently, and they work. They're a social learning network here in Australia, and they help a lot of people with transitioning, particularly people in the cropping sector who are transitioning to the use of systems such as pasture cropping and holistic management grazing and so on. So we're building up these folks, this network of folks, which all of it is destined to only increase the peer-to-peer learning possibilities and collaboration possibilities that you all have access to. So the membership pathway that we've developed is, to start with, is an orientation. So getting familiar with the Regrarians workplace and the whole package that you have. We ask people to then introduce their projects on the Regrarians Places group, then form the team that you'll be working with, understanding that our membership for the planner membership is a per project membership, not a per person membership. So we try and encourage people to pull, whether it's their kids or whether it's they've got a farm manager or managers, or they're in more of a project-based system where they've got a number of collaborators working on a project. We've got some projects where the architect's involved and the engineer's involved and so on. So we try and make it as flexible as possible and low cost as possible, and using the pool of funds to be able to support us as well as using the Regrarians workplace framework, which allows us to be much more efficient in how we work with quite a large number of people. Then when you do the first Rex, which for many of you, this will be the first Rex, we will encourage you to pick your priority layers. But then for some of you, you'll just watch the webinars as they come along, or the Q&As and that sort of thing. So you can pick and choose exactly how much you look at participating. We understand full well, and this is why we've developed this pathway, we understand full well that different people around everyone's different. Everyone's got a completely individual context, both within themselves and within their organizations and lives. And the way we've developed all of this is to reflect that. So we know that people have different amounts of time available. It's why we've developed a 1-year membership. It's why we understand that some people will only be able to do so much on one Rex, and then they might be able to do more on another one. And that's why we offer 2 Rexes within the period of your membership to fully participate on. So yeah, you might just watch and learn, or you might just pick a few layers, and I'll speak about that a bit more closely soon. 5 is the call. After you've done the Rex, and you can do it now or you can do it later, but you've got that opportunity to have a call with me and just have a one-on-one and to talk about your project. So that's something that I really enjoy doing, and we have a really great time doing so. I think it's a very great part of the program. The 6th is ask and show your questions and show your project in the Regrarians Platform layers. So, utilize the fact that we have a really, really strong peer-to-peer network involved here. And it truly is a professional development network. Some of you who will have been in here for a while would see the quality and the civility of this network. It needs no moderation from our perspective at all, because we've created we've nurtured, I might say, a really strong culture of practice. And secondly, it's really good that when you have, and I'd say this for the Rex as well, that don't use the private or the secret Rex groups to present your task work. Use the Regrarians Platform layers. It's not sensitive information, like you're saying, or what do you think about this dam, or what do you think about this road, or what do you think about these trees, and da 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 da. All that richens the benefit for all of us in terms of the development of these layer groups and all of the information that people can then easily search and find and help them accelerate their own transition to more regenerative agroecology. So it's a really good thing to do there. Now you come to Rex number 2, which I'll announce today is going to be directly after this one. So I'm going to be doing 26 weeks straight of webinars, which will be fun. We organised this one to work with our West Australian colleagues with the Peel Harvey Catchment Council. They approached us to develop a program, a fire prevention and mitigation program into which we wrap the Rex, and so that adjusted the normal timing that we do this. But we are going to have the usual program that runs over the Australian summer and the northern winter, because we know that so many people in the northern winter use that time for professional development and webinars and all of that sort of stuff, online learning. So we'll be launching the next one. I think I'll have a couple of weeks off, maybe, or a week, and we'll kick on again in November, but I'll announce those dates soon. But that's the time when you might pick another set of priorities, look at a whole range of other layers, which again I'll expand on, and then build and test your plan, and test your plan with us. Use the network to help you with that. And then, after you've done your Rexes and you've done your year, this is when you can really, again, start to talk with us, maybe have your call with me then, or others, and evaluate your next steps and priorities, and do that in the workplace. Leverage this magnificent platform, and consider also joining other programs to further. You get to a point, we'll only give you so much. And one of the great things about not only our collab partners, but other people that we know in the broader regenerative agroecological community is that there are a lot of really great programs out there. So if you want to continue, have a chat with us, and we'll certainly give you our advice on where you might proceed there. And then finally, now you've done all of this, do you need to do another Rex? Maybe your project warrants that investment so that you can keep the kind of level of contact with us through that process, or you might just become an active peer, or you might just, as so many people do, and this is the largest group of our membership, just watch and enjoy and the platform, and you know, just look at all the posts and interact with it silently almost, and just get on with your life and project. I mean, it's completely up to you. But the great thing is that you will continue for the life of all of this to have access. So even after you finish this 1 year of program, you will continue to be able to watch any of the webinars, the new Rex webinars on any of those new Rexes that we do, etc. There'll just be some of the products that you won't get access to, like the out of Rex programs, like Georgie's, you know, like Georgie's got a QGIS program coming up, and other bits and bobs like that you won't have access to. And I think you'd understand that, because, you know, we have to pay for these things, but you will have access to view. So with the quid pro quo on that is that, you know, if you want to be an active peer, then it helps for you to be able to maintain some currency. So that's the that's the give that we ask you if you're going to from your continued provision of any of these new programs that we have coming up. Okay, so the Regrarians platform is adapted from the Keyline scale of permanence. And I say adapted because we really, and the Keyline scale of permanence was outlined in 1958, as I'll explain in a moment. So we say adapted because we actually looked at this, and to start with, it was, I would say, based, but then adapted because as we have moved along, and now, you know, we're now a decade later, because I developed the platform before I developed the brand. I actually did the first course on that used what is now known as the Regrarians platform in 2011. First of all, here in Australia, with a group of holistic management professionals led by the late Bruce Ward, who invited me to train holistic management certified educators in Australia, the Keyline plan and farm planning, because they felt that the holistic management land planning process was limited, and so they wanted to expand their knowledge, so they asked me to do that. So that's where it started, and then soon after that we went to the Cowdrey estate in the UK and in East Sussex, and delivered the first of our 10-day programs, and that was enormously successful, and then on we went from there. So as we've gone along, as you do, you learn. And so whilst we were based to start with, and used these factors that Yeomans had come up with, they weren't necessarily very holistic, and they didn't include the triple bottom line considerations or regulations and energy generation and storage. And so it's useful to then look, and you can get a copy of this on the Google Drive that I'll discuss later. So the Keyline scale of relative permanence of things agricultural for the planning, development and management of agricultural lands is set out in this way. And so you can see the factors as they were then. And they're very much agricultural. Now, you know, when we're talking about what we are, you know, agriculture isn't just about how we interact with a piece of land. It's also how we interact with markets. It's how, you know, there's a whole lot more to this, to being successful in agriculture or agroecology, even more so. So that's where we needed to expand, but it's a really foundational base which we stand on the shoulders of, absolutely. Just to let you know as well, in terms of the rec support team, there's Georgie and myself are the primary people. Georgie operates at the other in Greece, so his timing is very different to mine. He would be in bed now, as so many people who are in Europe would be. And Georgie's a polymath, and he's a brilliant human being and great friend. And his primary assistance to you would be in the help, you know, particularly as we get to weeks 2, 3, 4, in helping you assemble your maps. Anyone who's interacted with Georgie would know that he's a mapping genius, and CAD and GIS genius. He's fantastic. So, and a wonderful person. And then myself, my main role is to help you with the training and any liaisons, question answering and so on. But as you go along, if you've not done this before, you'll start to understand better the way this program works. There's also, and this is just a photo of our 2016 or some of our 2016 Rex Tour graduates, but we've now got over 1,000 people who've done, well over 1,000 people who've done the Rex program, and most of them are members of the Regrarians workplace. So, and most of them, or many of them are, if I or you tag them, then they'll probably come in and help you out, because that's the culture that we've nurtured and really love. So I'm just looking at so many of these faces, and the great thing is that so many of these people are not unfamiliar to me. They're still active, and that's just brilliant. So so you are in a space which does work to help, which is great, and works to serve. So the platform itself, oh, go on. Yep, go back, hang on, we're up in there. Got all ahead of myself. So the Regrarians Platform, well, I'm using this term because I can't find anything else, but it is the world's most comprehensive agroecological landscape and enterprise planning platform. I mean, it builds on this, as I said, Yeomans' work was the first broad acre or broad scale agricultural landscape planning platform. There was nothing else before that. There were bits and bobs of soil conservation and this and that, but they were really treatments, individual treatments, as opposed to being a sort of a whole of farm application or platform. And we've certainly built on that, so that it's a planning platform specifically. Doesn't pretend to be anything else. It's not all things to all people. It's just what it is. And it's proven to be, it's thanks to all of the work that so many of us have been able to contribute. It's worked to be really, really powerful and really, really useful, and as a pathway for people. So let's get into the layers. So some of you will be already familiar with this, but we've got 10 layers. So building on Yeomans' 8 factors. So Yeomans went more or less from 1 to 8, although we've changed the words as we've discussed. And there's a whole lot of scope within each of these. So within the climate layer, we're talking about you and regulations and so on. And the geography layer, we're talking about how you actually look at the landscape and what it's capable of, and mapping, etc. The water layer is all about rehydrating the land and how we can harvest and store and reticulate and treat water. And then provide access for people and utilities and vehicles and telephony and all of the rest of it. Then the forestry layer is about all of the biota that we're interacting with and how we can integrate them into our agroecologies. Buildings, and where we're looking at living spaces and ag buildings and portable structures and so on. And fencing, what type of fences that we're looking at, and where they go, and soils around both the geotechnical and agronomic uses of soils and how to treat them and manage them. And then the economy layer, the analysis, strategy and planning of different capital flows. And then finally the energy layer, which is where we're looking at photosynthesis and the generation and storage of energy, particularly with furthering photosynthesis for as long as we can. But also in this layer are the energy intensive equipment that we use. So this is where we discuss machinery and implements and all of those sorts of things. Now, the scope of all of this, and this is where we've moved a bit away from Yeoman's concept of a scale of permanence, is that we're really looking at this. Yes, there is relative permanence in some of these layers, but I like to sort of not have it so that confines you. Any ecosystem is a really complex thing. And so it's really, and add the the complexity of humans to that, and, you know, our economic structures and, you know, all of the needs that we have in terms of, you know, electricity and our housing and all of the rest of it, it makes it really complex. And so to try and frame it in a way which is just about the relative permanence of different layers, I think is perhaps puts a limit on the whole framework that perhaps doesn't need to be there. It's certainly useful to consider that the climate is relatively rigid, but within that, you know, I've framed the term years ago that the climate of the mind is the hardest thing to change, but it can change. And for some people, changing their mind is easier than others. So if you look at that as relative permanence, well, they might be as fast as a photon of light, in which case it's not climate layer, is it? So the way I've looked at it is this is categorizing a whole range of topics and trying to do so to navigate all of the complexity that we have. And that's really what's ahead of us. Is, you know, most of you are not considered in the semantics or the philosophical part of this. You've got a piece of land, you've got a project, and you want to make it better. So let's just make it better and not worry about all the fluff. And this is a way that we've developed or co-developed with a whole range of people to be able to make that easier for you, make that transition easier for you. So within that, there's the constitutional or foundational layers of climate and geography. They're quite that. And then we've got the infrastructure and development layers. These are the layers where you're actually doing things, you know, where you're putting in infrastructure and so on. And then we have the management layers, and this is where we're doing more management of these systems as opposed to developing them per se. So in terms of the applications, to start with, we apply the Regrarians platform in the way that we layer our communications in the Regrarians workplace groups, which you would be familiar with or starting to become. So you categorize almost like a Dewey system, like a library system, or a forum for that matter. You categorize your communications according to these different layers, as we call them, not factors, layers. We also do this through Google Earth. So you'll become very familiar with Google Earth in the way that we have developed what we call the Google Earth template, or Regrarians Platform Google Earth template, which you have access to. And with that, you will be able to, you know, if anyone's used Google Earth, they know that it can be a dog's breakfast, can be all over the shop as far as its ease of use, especially when it comes to folder management. And so we've helped we've set up a template of folders so that it makes it really easy. And it means that you just answer questions. You can see here, you've got to fill in the bits. So you mark out your existing roads and you put in your existing utilities, and then you put your proposed ones and you build up all of it. Means that you can find things really easily. And when you share things with us and others to assess, makes it really easy. So we've done a bit of the background work for you to help with all of that, and all the way through. So yeah, it's a great program, and we're really grateful to Google for making it available and continuing to develop it. Then there's the Regrarians Platform Library in Google Drive. So if you go here, this is a really important, just to say this, if you haven't been here already, the Regrarians Planner members group is a secret group, and this is where you as members have access to a whole range of information. That pinned post, the orientation and access post, is really important. So if you haven't read through all of that, please do, and just go and have a click, and everything's linked and so on. But this here, the Regrarians Platform Library, is something that we've set up over the years. It was actually set up by some of our students from our 2016 tour. And there's a huge amount of information in there, lots of books and all sorts of things. But again, using the Regrarians platform to categorize all of the layers and resources and so on. So that's really useful. Also, and you'll see this when you look at my file manager over time, because I'll have my screen shared and you'll see the way I organize it. And that's not to say that you want to do it this way, but it doesn't hurt, especially when it comes to your farm, to act, because so many of us spend so many times on these digital devices, to actually have yourself organized, because most of you don't want to spend the least amount of time here and the most amount of time out there. So if that's the case, then get yourself organized. And if it comes to the operation of your farm, the platform again helps you to manage that much more simply. So let's talk about the core topic of the day, which is how do we use this platform when thinking about farm planning. So we've got these 10 layers, and within those 10 layers, there's a whole suite of different topics. And I've just noticed I made a mistake there. I haven't changed from the Spanish version. So we've got 7 cercos, which is the Spanish word for fencing, up in the top there. I can fix that up later. All right. So climate is the first of our layers. This is where we're looking at you and your family and the community you work with and the enterprise. So the climate of all of that, but also the culture of where you are, because that's really important to acknowledge. But then, as we zoom in on things, what's the climate of regulation and law that you work within? Really hard to change, and something that's quite framing, and for a lot of people in a lot of jurisdictions, debilitating. But then what about risk? And that risk goes to you, and because some people are more risk averse than others, and then some love a risk. So there's all of that. But then there's the meteorological climate as well that we have to consider, and all of the patterns that are emerging. And I feel greatly for those people in Europe and North America at the moment who are having to withstand the really hard parts of this, of extraordinary temperatures. I know it's going to be nearly 50 degrees in parts of Greece and Turkey and Bulgaria and elsewhere in Southern Europe today, and it will be, and people have had enormous amount of flood damage and whatnot. So there's all of this that goes on. We here in Australia understand all of that too well. It's something we're going to have to contend with, but it's really useful to understand that. So as we navigate all of this, there are people out there who've done some really great work, and perhaps no more than Alan Savory and his wife of 30 years or so, Jodie Butterfield, and their development of the holistic management framework. And a brilliant tool. We'll deal with that in weeks 2 and 3 quite closely to help you to understand where you're at and where all of the others are at in your place. And then with that, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, but also to understand all of the climate patterns that you have, the meteorological factors of how hot, how cold, and so on, all of those things that are going to feed into your decision making about what you do and how you navigate a future which in some parts of the world is looking pretty average, but that's not to say it's not without hope, because one of the great things about this world is it's not young. It's it's either 6,000 years old or 4.5 billion years, or somewhere in between. So depending on what you believe. And whatever the case, that's a long time. And so that's a long time for the species that we coexist with to have adapted to the circumstances that have been before, many of which they've experienced before. So that's hopeful. But it still doesn't mean it's easy. So we've got a bit to go ahead of us there. So when we look at this layer, we really look to ask you, what you gets you out of bed in the morning, what are your core motivations, and then going on from that, what are some of the frameworks that might help with that? And holistic management frameworks we encourage people to delve right into, because it provides a whole suite of quite profound transitional strategies that once even past that transition allow you to manage yourself and your family and your ecosystems with just that much more capability. We also look to having, like I said, kind of matching enterprises to human and meteorological climates. What are you capable of, and what's the climate capable of supporting within a landscape's own capability, which is really in the geography layer to determine. Then matching job personalities to job descriptions, because a lot of people aren't doing what they like and enjoy, and that's part of that reason for that is because they've never used human resource management strategies to determine that, of which there's plenty and that are available to you, if only you know that they are. And then identifying social, financial, and agroecological weak links that are available to you, and trying that. When I say available to you, meaning that these are things that you should be identifying so that you can avail yourself of strategies that will improve on that, because this is generally what we're in the business of, is incremental improvement, which leads me to being strategic, being incremental, pragmatic, and fiscally disciplined. You might decide to go a bit faster, but you need to understand what that's going to mean on holistically. What impacts is that going to have? And so that's part of your overall risk management. And then the other part of this is something a lot of people aren't able to do. And I think the COVID thing, especially for those of us who've been in urban lockdown in particular, the lack of access to nature, to each other, etc., has really made it very, very difficult and so for the generation of our own individual mental health and physical health, it's really important to, enjoy each other and enjoy the life that we're blessed to have, and do what we can to prolong it as much as we can. So I wanted to look at the sort of within this layer, a transition to what I'll call a regenerative agroecology, which I think is, when we bring it down to a title of what most of us are trying to achieve, this is it. So the first step is, and that's part of what we're doing here, is introducing you to regenerative agroecology and what that means, what that world of practice and treatments and management strategies, etc. are. And then secondly is, why are we doing what we do? And that's where we look at what I call holistic self-determination. I'm very much a liberal, you might say, in the traditional sense of liberalism. I might say a green liberal even. And my approach is that it's really important for the individual to be nurtured and for the individual to be able to express themselves. And generally, being social organisms will do that within a community context. And I would say that most of the people on this call are just that. You wake up in the morning with yourself and your own thoughts, and then you realize that you're either next to someone or you're in a community of other people. And how am I going to function in that? But it starts, I think, from my experience, to understand what you want to do, so that you can be in service to that, be in service to yourself, but then be in service to the greater community. And so that we can all live as well as we can. So why do we do what we do? But it starts with us self-determining. I'm very big on self-determination. So the next part of that is what resources do I have now? And this is, you might say, well, this is where we look at the climate layer, where we're assessing a lot of that within the framework of the holistic management questioning, which I'll delve into in a moment. And then secondly, do we have the mapping that we need? Do we have the skills and so on? And what return on investment do we require at each part of the transition period? So some of you are in this as a business. Some of you are in this as a lifestyle. Some of you are in both for both reasons, or all of the above. So it helps for you to understand what you have, what your own skills are and around you, and so on, so you can sort that through that transition. Fourth is, where will we focus our attention? So this is like I was saying earlier about, if you're doing this Rex and it's your first one or your second one, what's the focus of this particular one? It's really hard. It's a really small percentage. Like we're talking about 1 or 2% of people who do the planner program actually get through and produce all of the task work. Well, A, attend every webinar, B, produce all of the task work that we ask. It's because it's hard. There's a lot to do. So, and that's one of the reasons why we've put this out over a year, because it's, by the time you take care of yourself and your kids and whatever your job or whatever else your context is, I think it's unrealistic to put yourself under that pressure. Like I said, and we see that by the evidence of our participation. We make it as easy as possible, and yet people are only be able to give what they give. So responding to that is what we've done here with this program. So where will you focus your attention, and where will we place elements in the landscape, and where are the markets for your products? So there's all of that sort of questioning that will come for you with the development of your transition, how it's all going to happen. So when is the next question? So when will we begin our transition? When will you push various go buttons? And that's something in that, because usually, there's a chain of custody, as I call it. So as soon as let's say you go and decide to put in a fence or a fencing system, well, that's a project within the greater project. You've got to, there's a whole lot of stuff you've got to organize that. And that may conflict with other things that you've got going on. So, and this is where some of the time management complexity that is such a big issue with agricultural ecosystems. It's funny. I was, if you haven't watched it, it's quite a funny film or series. Jeremy Clarkson's latest series, which for those of you who don't know, Jeremy Clarkson is best known for his TV show or online show called Top Gear, a show on cars and motor vehicles and all that, which isn't everyone's cup of tea, and he is not everyone's cup of tea, as it were. But he's got a farm. He's got 1,000 acres in the Cotswolds in Oxfordshire in the UK, and he's produced through Amazon this series. I think it's 7 or 8. And whilst it's a bit of a piss take, if you'll excuse my French at times, it still at the same time shows that there's a lot of time management that goes on with all of this. And I'm watching that, I was thinking, gee, I don't know that he would have been the ideal Rex participant, but it would have been pretty interesting to have advised him on how that first year might have gone. Had he been. So I looked at it from that lens, but it was also fairly entertaining and I think well worth watching. And then who will perform the various tasks in the, so again, you can see this is a project management thing, who's going to be involved and so on. So it's not just about the pieces, it's also about the people who are going to be doing stuff. And then how do you feel about all of this, about this transition? You might start with that question even, but, because there's going to be a lot of reflection along the way. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be rain that comes too heavily at times when you don't want it. There'll be no rain coming at times when you really need it. And there'll be winds, and there'll be heat, and there'll be cold, and there might be things that happen in your family. There'll be all sorts of scenarios which are part of the dynamics of navigating all of this. And you have to ask yourself, are you up for that too? Because some people, depending on where they're at personally or otherwise, may not be, and so that's okay. You still might be able to support the project in future. So yeah, there's a lot of questions. I mean, this is all about questions. So when we're looking at a transition, we've got to ask a whole lot of questions with answers so that you can, not suffer inertia. All right. So to help with that and to help to get a lot of the answers down, we developed the Regrarians Platform checklist. Now, again, because of our peer-to-peer learning framework that we've developed, which is awesome. This is like an open source community, well, open within our own space, that we've been able to continually develop all of this checklist. So this is this is version 5 that we've developed and released, which will be there for you. And it may even change within this Rex, but anyway. So the questions that we've got here over the coming weeks, so this will be part of your task work for this week if you can get to it, is to, I'll show you where all of this is in a moment or a bit later, is to start filling this out. And you will not be able to answer every question in this checklist. It's about, I think it's about 10 pages, and it's front loaded. Most of the stuff on the front is about, these sort of questions about you, about the resource base that you work with, what your statement of purpose is. And some of this you will further refine and develop, particularly when we do weeks 2 and 3 of the Rex, which is when we really delve into the holistic context development, which is basically what you see on the screen here. All of this is pretty well holistic context. So, what makes a good life? What challenges do you have? What's your purpose? What's the future resource base going to look like? And this is straight thank you to the Savory Institute for allowing us to have this in front of you. But it's really, really useful and really, really helps people to, helps us. When you frame this, it really helps us to understand where you're at and what your context is, because so much of this, if we look at it as a game, the game is you establishing what your context is and within that, what your capabilities are and what the future is what you want the future to look like for you. And then you've got this landscape and where is that? Where's it located? How hot, the climate, the meteorological climate and so on. So you're looking at this human context working in with this landscape context, and how is that going to mesh together? Where are the conflicts and where's the meshing and where are the possibilities? So you completing this and then you sharing with us where you are and us looking at the land shape and all of that sort of stuff and bringing that together. That's where our experience in being able to pinpoint things really helps. And that's one of the reasons why I'm sure that you're here to benefit from that. And then there's other questions which are additional to that, which we'll delve more deeply into next week. And that's around, intergenerational succession pathways that you're looking at for the future, what your level of eco-literacy is, or the eco-literacy. So how literate are you around ecological principles and processes? And then we've got all of the climate, the biospheric factors, as it were, the meteorological climate. And I haven't had anyone yet who's been able to complete this, complete every line here, because it's really hard to find all of each and every bit of the data. What's important though is that all of the questions are there. And if you can get a fair bit of this done, well, then at least how hot, how cold, how much rain, etc., those sort of key climate factors, then that helps us to really understand where you are and what potentials exist for you and what risks there are for you and so on. So then we look at, this is other thing that I try and have us consider within the climate layer, is the concept of big D development versus big M management. This is a throwback to back in the 1980s and 90s, when there was a whole discussion in Australian politics about being a big L liberal or a small L liberal. And what that was about was, are you, or in the context of this, is when we look at what your steps will be many of you will have just bought a piece of land or you've just read Charlie Massey's book, or there's something that has inspired you. So one of them might be that you have always wanted to buy a piece of land and you finally got it, right? And you're very excited. It's like a new lover, and you behave like you did when you got the love of your life. And that means that you're buying things without really thinking about it. It means that you're doing things without the full weight of consideration because you're infatuated. And then there's other people who, like I said, have read a Charlie Massey book, or read a permaculture book, or read holistic management, or whatever it's been, or you've had an illness, or there's been something, a fire, there's been something that is instigated the knowing that you have to do things differently. And so then it's that first step along that road, which for so many people is really expensive because it involves so much innovation, and innovation which is not assisted very well. In fact, in some ways, it's actually preyed upon. So, and I'm not going to say intentionally because people don't know any differently, but a lot of people learn how to develop their farm and not by managing it, but by going to a produce store, which is or something local where there's people who know a bit about rural projects. Maybe they grew up on a farm or this, that, and the other, but they're there to sell you things, and they'll sell you fencing, and they'll sell you pipes, and they'll sell you troughs, and so on and goes. And so what you end up with is often a project which is really front-ended on a lot of development, and when actually the better pill for you right at that moment would have been some management. So but that's not to say that at times on some occasions on different projects, there will be a time to push some buttons, some development buttons. But by and large, what we find most people are lacking is management and having a stronger focus on management. I have to say too, that for a lot of people, management is an anathema to them because it doesn't feed their innovation genie. When you do the personality assessment on many of you will be really high on innovation. And so that makes it really hard for you to suffer the mundanity of managing these systems, where it's doing the same thing day in, day out, and applying to yourself a whole suite of disciplines, which are difficult for you to keep doing. So, but if you want to do this and you want to do it successfully, the evidence, at least from what we've seen on now tens of thousands of projects, is that it's really important to understand this and understand the levers that you're pulling at any given time, because that's really at the core of all of this. So with that, I've got a couple of scenarios. So I've got Sarah and her partner. They're both in their early 30s and they've got a couple of kids. Just bought the place, moving there in 3 to 5 years. So they live in town still. It's a bit of a blank slate. It's got a couple of dams or ponds, got no roads. It's a grassy woodland. So it's probably an old block that a farmer sold because it was their back 40 or back 100 or whatever and was losing productivity. And so on. It's got no house or outbuildings, and it's got a couple of fences. So it's a pretty rundown place. If it was a house, it would be called a renovator's delight or something like that, or a place for the future, whatever the real estate agent decided to pitch. But if you broadly fit this category, I don't know if we have any Sarahs here, but probably. Then there's a whole pathway ahead of you to being able to check on how you'll proceed. So with that, if we look at Sarah and the first Rex, how might Sarah and her family interact with this? So it might be based on the scenario that we've got, that Sarah and her partner might look at really strengthening what their context is, their holistic context, getting all of their maps and understanding of where they're at as far as all of that's concerned. Looking at the water layer and going, okay, well, I've got a couple of dams. That means I don't have to go and build dams, but I'm still going to look at them, but they're not going to be my first priority. Do I need any roads? Well, you might say, well, look, I do want to build there in the next few years, so I'm going to need to get a road and a house site. There'll be a bit of earthwork, so I might start a bit of planning on that. The forestry layer, well, I've got trees there. It's a woodland, so I want to have a nice environment. It's sort of already there in terms of a frame, but going to the soils later, I need to manage it. So I'll start that process, and to do that, I'm going to have to work a few things out. So I'll put a bit of focus into the planning of this, right? So we haven't done anything. All we're doing is, the Rex is not about doing anything apart from planning, right? It's a planning course. It's not a doing course. So the doing happens after. So you're planning to do in this framework here. So it's important, as you can see here, to try and not bite off more than you can chew, and look at the layers in terms of, how much am I going to be able to do and what's important right now. So in between the Rex, oops, go on. So what happened there? Go ahead. Hang on, I'll just go ahead. I think I jumped one there. Oh yeah. So for the second Rex, Sarah's got a different set of scenarios ahead of her. Like, she's done in between the Rexes. Actually, I thought I'll just bear with me for 2 shakes. I think I got this out of sequence. Navigator. Oh yeah, go on. Yeah, gotcha. Sorry. That's what happened. All right, I'm sorry, I just lost my thought stream for a moment there. Okay. So there's the first Rex. Come on, go on. Oh, you're not working for me. So there's the first Rex and what we're going to focus on there. And then we've got the second one, which is where there's a different set of priorities, planning priorities, because you've got your holistic context out of the way now. You've got all your mapping and your land capability. You know the land. You spent the time on the land in between the Rexes. You won't have much time in between the Rexes on this occasion, but ordinarily you would have 3 to 6 months of time between, and that would then give you a lot of time to go and reflect on the landscape, and take those on-site notes and observations, and then they'll feed into that understanding of the geography layer. We've got to a point now where we've actually said, gee, we actually, in this case, we're going to move ahead with getting our planning permit or a development application in for our house. And, because that's important to us. We want to get we want to get out here in the next few years while our kids are still young, and so on and so forth. So we can be settled out here before they get high school, or however you want to frame it. So different people will have different contexts, and then pull that all together. Now, let's say, part of this, this whole program is about having you plan your places according to the Regrarians platform, if you choose to. And with that, that means that, if there was to be a Rex 3, so we've done this in 1 year, well, now we're into year 2 or 3, and Sarah and her partner, having learned this method of farm planning, they'll come back to it and go, all right, well, we're at year 3 now. Which buttons are we going to push on the layers now, and so on. So it's really about framing the sort of levers that you're going to pull here. Are we going to pull what are we going to focus on this year? What do we absolutely need to, with what we've got ahead of us in the project management? Because that's what this is. This is project management for someone like Sarah in particular. All right, so another scenario. And I could, everyone here has got a different one. So here we've got Em and Rod. They're in the early 50s. They've got older kids. They've been on the property for 20 years. They want to change to regenerative with their kids. don't have any maps of the place, they're running out of water, the roads are terrible, the pastures are shot, the house and sheds are all good. Fences need replacement and they're losing money every year, right? So that may speak to some of you, I don't know. But these are scenarios that we've witnessed. And like I said, we could have any number of different combinations of situations. So with Em and Rod, climate, yeah, at this stage, I think that it's probably on the first one, given their circumstances. They probably just need to get ahead and get themselves, as we'll talk about, get what layer sorted. I don't know this definitively, but when you look at the really big weak links of their system, what are the ones that you see? Well, what I see are the economy, right? They're losing money. There's no point going ahead with all of this and putting too much time and store into how we feel, etc. When you know our financial situation is really dire. So let's look at focusing on that layer as a result. But then look at what are the limiting factors that are really what are the things that we can turn around with a relatively small amount of cash to be able to improve our economic output. And in the case of this is a grazing property, then that's going to be a focus on, as they say, water and wire. So how can we make water, the access of water more efficient to our livestock? But what's going to enable that as well is fencing. So that's why we looked at this as being, well, that's why I looked at this as being the way that we would approach it. So certainly to do that, it's going to help that we understand, like in the climate layer, we might focus. Yeah, let's see if we can spend the time to understand where we want to go with all of this and do a bit of that. But don't make it your key priority. Your key priority is to move along with things. So let's focus on survival before we talk about thriving, because that can come first. First things first. Let's get on with the job. So the second. So when we look at the on-ground works that go in between, because these people are on the farm, are on the property, well, we're definitely working on the economy part of it, and so that's I might say that's on ground, but that's something that we're going to be sorting out as far as how can we manage that economy layer through a whole range of different arrangements, whether that's renegotiating your debt, to refinancing. There's a whole range of different stuff and different packages that are available and so on that may be able to assist you. And also different ways that you might be able to immediately market some stuff. It might be too that you look at your energy layer and look at all of your catalogue of machinery and go, well, actually, when I take a decluttering exercise, as so many farms have, that we might go, actually, there's a lot of capital that's just sitting there. So instead of me borrowing money to go and buy fencing or buy a bit of pipe, I'll just liquidate that old disc plow, or I'll do this and that, because that'll buy me, get me some capital that means I can put it into development and so on. Stuff that's going to actually make money as opposed to being wasted capital in a paddock. And many of you would know what I'm talking about there. And then, so we'll focus on that soil layer by a change in management. So the soil layer is a management layer. So that would be, if it's a grazing property, then that would mean a wholesale shift to holistic planned grazing and whatever modes of grazing are included within that, but a plan for grazing. That would be done within a framework, within a physical layout of fencing and water infrastructure, which may not be completely done in the first year or so, but it will certainly be on the way. And then you can start to monitor the results and see how much time's involved and what's it going to cost, so that as you go forward, you can then, because you'll continue probably to have to focus on the economy layer as a priority until you get yourself out of jail. And you can get from the point of survival to thriving, right? That's where we're going. So in the second Rex, this is where, let's say, that we would, have the opportunity to, still focus on those layers that are super important, particularly the economy and soils layer. Might be that access is now presenting itself as a limitation. It may not. The water and fencing layers still need to, we're getting a bit of feedback. So now we can move ahead with we've established what templates of fencing and water infrastructure are working for us. And then we can go, okay, well, now I'm going to sort of reward myself in a way by building on the holistic context and all of the rest of it, and really give myself the next steps on there. These are just scenarios, but I'm just giving this as a framework for how you might be able to use the platform to develop priorities for yourself in the future. So coming to this is one of the most popular layers, the geography layer. Because it involves maps and it involves looking at the land and developing some really core understandings about drawing things and saying what we're going to do and all that sort of stuff. And quite honestly, when I did my whole farm planning certificate back in the early 90s or mid 90s, it was 94, 95, there was nothing about the whole context stuff. It was all about land capability mapping and mapping and mapping. And you started off with one map and an aerial photo, and then you put a sheet on that and you drew what you had, and then you drew what you want, what the land capability classes were and soil types and whatnot. And then you drew another layer about how you were going to do it. It was like, yippee, off we go. Now we better pay for it and hope it all works out. And there was no mention of how one should set up priorities or how that reflected what we had as life opportunities, or what our, look at the intergenerational equity arrangements that we'd have in terms of leveraging the potentials of our children or others in our organization, and so on. All of that, none of that was mentioned. So that's, so whilst all of that stuff is really valuable and I found really interesting and useful, it's not holistic. It doesn't do enough for us in helping us to successfully navigate the transition to a regenerative agroecology, or just any farming system for that matter. So it's a hard game. So when we look at this, like I said, we're looking at monitoring, we're looking at mapping, we're looking at Keyline, and all that that means. And I won't get into too much of that now, because we do spend a couple of weeks on this particular layer. But it also looks at demography. What are the populations around us in terms of our markets, and so on, and where's that all looking? Just going to clip out for a minute because I just want to make sure that, yep, they're all there. It's all good. Thank you. Okay. Nice attendance today. That's awesome. So with the geography layer, to sort of put a bit more context on it, this is where we're mapping and monitoring our assets. And we do that in Google Earth. We do it in Google Drive and your phone. We just seem to find that that's really easy, and that's where we do the mapping of our Regrarians Platform layers. Here in Australia, we get a lot of topography from the Elvis service. There'll be other services around the world that we have, as we've gone along, it's part of our sport to help to find for you the mapping that's available. Sometimes it's not so good, and so we've got to look at other ways that we can get it, even with using drones and that sort of thing. And then we look at calculating your catchments. We look at different monitoring apps and different and spreadsheets for helping us to put all of this together. There's other ways that people do this too, in terms of connecting with those around them. And this is where you're looking at, different WhatsApp and Facebook or other producer group connections. And also that question about how does geography affect your marketing? I mean, how proximate are you to other populations, and what do those populations look like, and so on. So with that, with the checklist, what we're looking at there is to have you identify some of this. So what does your place look like in terms of where it is, what its acreage is, what mapping do you have, but then also looking at the demography and psychography of the region. So demography is the question around how much people earn, what age class are they, etc. But then psychography is a question around what's their vibe. Like if you look at the towns that are around you, each of those population centres will have a different vibe. Some of them will be very artsy. Some of them will be very conservative. You know, there'll be all of that that goes with the psychological profiling of that place, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the geography layer proper in this program. I mean, the geology and all of that sort of thing, you know, and you know, what is your geology? Have you even do you understand that? Have you questioned that? Because that's really fascinating. Different landscape elements. Again, I don't expect that you'll be able to answer these in the first week of this program. These are some of this you're going to have to understand what it actually means, and that's part of what we're attempting to do here for you or with you. Then different regulations that you have, and so on, and jurisdictions that you're part of, and all of that sort of thing. And then some of the community dynamics, you know, about your neighbours and so on. So things to consider. Now the water layer, like I said earlier, we're looking at reticulation and storage and treatment, and this is where we also address the fire layer, the considerations of fire. Fire is something that you sort of got to look at across the board on every layer, as so often it is. I mean, if you're thinking about the water layer, you're also thinking about the economy layer and how the economy layer, you know, that's what I mean about this platform being one where it's just strictly a scale of permanence. No, it's not, because it can't. This is highly integrated thinking where we're going, all right, well, if I think of the water layer and all that I've got with that, I've got to think of the climate layer, the geography, you know, where's it going to go? Well, the where things are going to go is going to be guided by the geography, the topography. How much is it going to cost? Well, my financial planning is going to influence that. What's going to power it? Well, that's the energy layer, and so on it goes. So there's a lot of integration that goes. And what also might be here is that the fencing layer and the water layer and the access layer often come together because they're all lines. They're fence lines, they're roads, which are lines, and there's water pipes. They're all lines. So, yeah, and they've all got to be accessible together in the way that we work things. That when we get into managing these systems, they've all got to work together. So there's a whole lot of integration of the different layers to navigate, and that's again part of this game if you look at it that way. Fortunately, we've developed some pretty solid pathways and patterns for that, which you'll better understand as we go along. So priority number one, as far as the water layer is, and doesn't matter where you are in the world, is 100% ground cover 100% of the time. And I'll re-emphasize that time and time again. Just this morning, I got a note from the Isle of Wight off the bottom of England there, and people asking me what would it cost for you to consult to develop a plan for our island, because we're running out of water and we've just had a shitload of flooding. It's like, hello. A failure. Well, the first thing, I haven't finished my response, is that the first thing is you know, the understanding of why this has happened is actually pretty clear. I said, as I've written so far, this question of yours takes me back to 2011 when the University of Coventry and the Midlands of the UK invited me to come up and do a drought proofing workshop in the UK. I mean, the UK is Great Britain is a place where, you know, droughts don't happen that badly. But what's the drought here? The drought's in the soil. The drought is in soil management being so appalling for so long that it's got to the point where it either suffers drought or it suffers from flooding because there's no infiltration. It's a two-edged sword of the same sword. Anyway, that's where we're at. So use gravity and pipe where possible. Gravity is this wonderful thing that keeps us all seated here and not floating around in the ether, which sounds like fun as well. But then it's something we can really take advantage of, and using pipe wherever possible. So one of the greatest outcomes, as I've often said, of the oil age is plastic pipe. It's brilliant. It's such an enabler, and it will last if it's buried for goodness knows how long. Much longer than probably our great-great-great-grandchildren will be alive if we do it properly. And then understanding volume. So what does all that mean, and mapping it? And so I'll deal with that as we get to that layer specifically in the program. So when we look at some of the questions, and there'll be more, you might add more to this, but what are your access rights? What's groundwater that you've got? What's stream? So you're really asking what sort of classes or sources of water that you have, be they in groundwater storage or streams or ponds or tanks or and so on, and how are you getting it about, and so on. We'll build on that as we get to that layer specifically. The access layer is where we're looking at roads and tracks and trails and markets, utilities, labour, and all of that sort of thing. And what's all that going to look like in terms of how we put that together? So, place access according to topography. As I mentioned before, one of the great things about that we've developed, particularly through the lens of using the Keyline geographic analysis and geometric analysis, but particularly the geographic analysis, is that when we're looking at these lines, like I said, of water and fencing and access, that they're so contiguous often in the way that they're actually placed on the landscape. So, the topography will tell us where to put a line. And then once we do that, then one line will actually end up being 2, 3, or 4 other lines, which are all together in one corridor. And so much of that happens, which is super cool. So when you get over that, it's such a liberating, it's like the land has told you what to do. The topography has told you what to do. You just got to do some simple analysis of that landscape form, which is part of what we'll do in, I think, weeks 4 and 5. And when we do that, then then a lot of this stuff about where things go will just come to be, which is great, because so much of the questioning that a lot of people have when they're looking at farm planning, just the physical part of it, where is about where do I put things? Where does that fence go? Where do those trees go? Where does that pipe go? Where does that, all of that, where does that road go? The great thing about the Keyline program is that it tells you where all of that is. Now, you can have complexity within that. Some of you might have done natural sequence farming workshops and this, that, and the other, or other farm planning programs that are out there, or just have your own ideas. And by all means, but let's look at that and let's see how that all works and start to question or reconcile those values and those positions that you might be proposing. So again, we're looking at the external. So in this case, when we get to a number of these layers, is about what do we got and what do we want. So what are they looking like, and what's their condition, and so on. But then in addition to that is utilities. I'll probably need to further develop this when we talk about people, in terms of, in fact, I've been remiss in not adding that in as yet, but that's where we're looking at, different labour markets that are available and all of that sort of thing. How limited are they for you, and what sort of potentials are there for you to address that? The forestry layer, like I said earlier, this is where we're looking at biota broadly. And this is where we're going to say, all right, well, all of the different organisms, you might say this is the biology layer almost, but that's a bit amorphous. And I wanted to still pay some homage to P.A. Yeomans by not straying too much from his original set. But the forestry layer is really, to me, like whenever we look at a forest, whether it's a woody grassland or a grassland, to me is a forest system. It's a forest ecology. There's very few ecosystems on the planet which doesn't include woody plants and non-woody plants. You might look at it, if you look at 100 square meters, well, maybe it's all grass. But then if you go down into the valley and in the valleys there might be some trees because there's the because there's the reliability of water to support woody plants and so on. So I try and think of that in that way. And then because so many people, because we've done such a wonderful job of deforesting this planet, I think that there's a lot of upside as well on us reintroducing woody plants back into our ecosystems and considering the role of fungi and other biota, bacteria, etc. That's what we're looking at with this layout. It's about how do we integrate the different biota into our whole. Not about how we manage them. The soils layer is about how we manage them. The forestry layer is about how we assemble them. All of those living systems to an extent. And with that, so think flora, fauna, fungi, and all biota, not just trees. Plant and retain the right trees and shrubs in the right place at the right time, and don't, and this is just a point for any systems that you might do. Don't put a $10 tree into a 20-cent hole. Prepare, be prepared. That's what you're doing here. You're investing money to be in this program. So, realize the privilege that you have in being able to do so and make the most of it, and really honor that. And also try and create an oasis for your homestead. A lot of people don't do that, and as a result, life can be pretty utilitarian, but I'll talk about that more when we get along. Just take a sip. Lovely iced coffee now. Flora, fauna, fungi, etc., and the different kinds of layouts. So there's a whole range of different layouts. Again, we'll delve with that when we get into the forestry layer. But looking at it from the perspective of different integrations, what types of systems you have there already, and then again, what have we got? What do we want? Just speculate there, and that might change over time as you go through. You might park that analysis in completely, where you do a bit now where you say, well, this is some of the stuff that we've got, or you might just park that and wait until we get to that layer and you look at it more critically. Then we've got the buildings layer, and this is where we're looking at homes and sheds and portable infrastructure and also processing infrastructure, which is a portable sawmill is like a portable building. It's fun sometimes as someone who's doing a lot of the categorization to go, oh, all right, where do I put portable? What layer do I put this and that? There's an argument for putting portable milling and that sort of thing into the energy layer with other equipment. So, just as long as it's somewhere, and as long as we consider it, that's all that really matters. But with that is, considering there's a lot of innovation on the building side, particularly when it comes to the portable building side of things. It's awesome. And we've got some really great innovators in the workplace, people like Amilcar Nunez from Mexico, who's got this herbazole system, as we can see there. But then there's the stuff that we've known for some time around solar passive buildings and this, that, and the other. And then some of the newer stuff around on-farm processing and all that, which is really exciting, and because it's enabling people to get a better share of the retail dollar and so on, and employ more people, will be in greater control of the whole value chain. It may not make them much more money, but it gives them a lot better feeling and has the value chain stay closer to home. And that's something that's been, for those of our participants or Rex members, Regrarians members and alumni who have developed on-farm processing systems, those who have done that or have done it in the period of COVID have really come out with a lot more resilience than those who have not, because as many of us would understand, COVID has really tested the value chains that we have been familiar with for some time. So when we look at it more closely, more broadly, I should say, is where we're looking to, if we've got buildings, to retrofit those that we have to increase their function, amenity, and energy efficiency. And also look at how we can examine the flow of processes in the built environment, whether that's whether that's with us considering how we're going to do animal processing or vegetable processing or whatever it is that we're doing in terms of a value add on site, where we've got production, we're going to bring that into a built environment, and how we're going to actually run that through. So the examination of flow is really important with all of that. And build onto that too, which we've got a fair bit in the buildings chapter, which is available if you haven't got a copy of it. It's a really great chapter. We're very proud of it. Is the work around fire. So there's an increasing number of environments around the world which are being, because of different climate change factors, which are being at greater risk of fire than they would have been before, of wildfire than what they would have been before. So this is a layer in which, because there's so much capital built into, financial capital built into the home and the building layer, that it's really important for us to look at fire through the lens of water, because the water layer has a really tight linkage with it. Secondly, with the forestry layer, because that provides a lot of the fuel for the fire, so our management of that, and that also goes to the soils layer in terms of how we're managing the forestry layer. But then when it, if it comes to the home, then what sort of design features will we put into our buildings and our building envelope or envelopes, so that they can function well from a fire mitigation perspective and so on. So again, in the checklist here, what have we got and what are we looking to build, more or less? And looking at some of the roof areas and that sort of thing, I'll probably need to broaden that out. And if anyone's got any suggestions, then by all means. All right, fencing. Go for time. Oh, yeah, pretty good. We'll have a bit of time for some questions as well. Although I've got a podcast interview at 11 o'clock, so I better mosey on. So fencing layer, this is where we look at all of the stuff with fencing. So the different styles of fencing, as we call it. So perimeter, yards, laneways, electric, subdivision, temporary, shepherdry. I haven't put in there natural, I should put that in there. But living fences as well. And, it's a layer that a lot of people spend a lot of time on, because so many of our members are livestock producers. So it's something that we've generated quite a lot of expertise on. And when I say we, I mean our whole workplace has generated a huge amount of expertise, because we've got so many very experienced practitioners who get excited about fencing. It's one of those layers that if you put a question up about fence in the fencing group, you'll get 20 different answers very, very quickly. So with that, fence the topography, fence using electricity, fence knowing it's 2021, not 1000 BC, and map your fencing layer. That's basically what we've got there. And consider all of the other possibilities as well, as far as the dense, and this is where you link in the soils layer, particularly if you're, in terms of grazing, what sort of levers you will pull as far as grazing density is concerned. Those levers are largely defined by fencing and water infrastructure, so particularly portable stuff and so on, as we'll discover. So here we're looking at all of the different types. So basically, again, what assets do you have, and what are you looking to have in the future? Soils, like I said, this is a management layer, and so here we're looking at planned grazing and cropping, and they're using the different frameworks that are out there for that. And that's not just being developed by the people of the holistic management community. There's others outside of that who we look at as well, because we're not beholden to any individual methodology. There's lots that inform our practice. And then we're looking at agronomy. Again, there's lots of different opinions on the way that we should manage soils. Lots of different pathways there. And then the geotechnics of a place. So, especially if you're looking at any building programs in the future, how suitable are the soils for foundations? What impact will they have on foundation design and so on? And how, if you're going to do any on-site effluent treatment, or if you're going to do build a dam or a pond, you need to know what the physical characteristics of the soils are for that, for building purposes, not for growing purposes. So although that array of geotechnical analysis will actually help to inform some of your agronomic decisions about how suitable that soil is for growing things as well, and what treatments you might then approach it with, and what sort of management strategies that continue. So it's a very big layer, this one, and we'll go on from there. Yep, I've got a question. Oh, so Reese, hi, where do we find the checklist we've been using? Couldn't find it on Google Drive. Just hang on if you can for a moment, please, Reese, because I'll answer that question as we get to the end there. So thank you for asking. So the soils layer, so I've got a pretty fundamental proposition here, and that's to make topsoil formation the #1 outcome of human habitation. And I'll just leave it at that until we get to that layer. But that's my primary expectation of humanity. That's the primary thing that humans should be focusing on if we're to survive as a species. If we do that, then we're good. And we'll evolve into something else rather than become extinct. That's my opinion anyway. So the soils layer, we're looking at, as I said, plant grazing crops, mineral fertility. So we're looking at the agronomic testing, the geotechnical testing. We're looking at what toxicity we have, residues, etc. What are the treatments that have gone before us in terms of artificials, and then what in terms of biologicals, if you've been a biological producer for a while or the place has been under that management, and then what sort of livestock treatments and so on. There may be other considerations, but that's what we have currently. And we'll look at that again in more depth when we do the soils layer. The economy layer, this is a pretty broad one, and as you'd expect, and this is where we're looking at, all of the analysis of planning of what we want to do as we go ahead. We've done a lot of that sort of work, and we've got a lot of templates to help people to determine, maybe you've got a bright idea about an enterprise. Well, let's put it through an enterprise budget and forecast, and let's see what it actually will take and assess whether it's feasible or not. And then you've got there and you're going. What does it take to keep going? You can't ever do the same thing forever. Without change, you've got to continually adapt to all of the complexity of not only the natural world, but also the human world that you exist in. Whether it's rebranding or just staying ahead of the curve or changing enterprises, so that because your enterprise right now might not be making money, or just the market speaks to you in different ways. So, or that your stage of life changes, and you have to go through transitions. So on it goes. So it's a fairly big layer. So from that, we have to understand the difference between a growth model and a non-growth model. I won't get into that too much now, but it's basically where you're looking at what those differences are, because to continue to grow is something that people will want to do, and then some people want to have something that's more circular, that's much more slower and incremental. So non-growth may not mean non-growth completely. It just might mean that the growth is a lot slower than what it might be for others with different ambitions, particularly those who are classically ambitious. Your ambition, if you're ambitious, your ambitiousness might direct you to having something that's really solid state and just clicks along without getting crazily busy. That's what we have. We've got a model which I would say is a slower growth model than others who are out there. I want to take over the world, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. That's not the way we roll. And if others want to do that and manage that, then go for your life. Some people want to become polyface farm in 1 year. if you want to try that, I don't know anyone who's been able to, even with really high levels of capital, but if you want to be the first, then by all means, have a crack. Get your corporate structures sorted, so all of that sort of stuff needs to be organized. You need to have the right sort of thing in place there. And a broader sort of point that my wife, Lisa Jane Heenan, puts forward is that, we should only be supporting enterprises that have the health of the planet, its people, and all of its species as their first priority. We don't proselytize too much. We don't put words in people's mouths or suggest you should do certain things. However, we think that it's important that, and it's usual that most people who come to our program and come to think about regenerative agroecologies of the future, we usually do so because they have a joint concern for the health of this planet and other people and other species. So demonstrate that. And then finally, managing your economy like a perennial species, because you are. A lot of people don't, and I'll elaborate again further on this when we get to the economy layer in the program. But a lot of people out there don't manage. They don't run perennial species, but B, they run annual species a lot, and then they're on it. Then they themselves become annuals. They're perennial organisms that behave like annuals, and that's no way to be, because a lot of us are going to be here for a long time. We're one of the longer lived organisms on this planet, and that's amazing. That's a real gift that we have. So let's try and manage the journey as best we can, so that we can all realize as many benefits of being so as we can. So, as I said before, this is analysis, strategy, value chain. There's a lot to all of this, but we've sort of confined it to here so far. Look at all your enterprises, what corporate profile you might have, whether you're a company or a sole trader or a trust or whatever else it is. What financial planning strategies you have. I mean, they're single lines. Within the template, you can increase the number of lines quite easily. It's in a Google Documents platform. So you can do that. What budgets you have, any certifications or insurances, what governance strategies you have in terms of who you're working with as externals to help you with that, external professionals and so on. If you're looking at marketing, what problems do you have? What are you trying to solve? And then, as you build, what strategy you have, what's the narrative you're trying to build around what you have, and that'll be where you go back up to the top, and you might look at the climate layer in the checklist and look at your statement of purpose. And it's amazing how much of that really helps you to then come down to the economy layer with the development of your narrative and all of your social media outreach and all of the rest of it, and who you collaborate with, and on it goes. Then what sort of processing systems you're involved with, and logistics, and are there any ecosystem services platforms that you're looking to approach or involve yourself with? And finally, the energy layer. There's my darling there. It's Joe Palacia, the late Joe Palacia, and Liz. Trish Allen's place. Sorry, Trish. And lovely wood stack that they had at their property in Matakana in New Zealand, Rainbow Valley Farm. So photosynthesis is our focus here, because it's one of the primary sources of benefit for agroecologies. Sunlight catalyzes a transformation that occurs within leaves, and that results in energy being produced in a form that is available to the whole ecosystem, whether it's in the form of carbohydrates and then cellulose as in fibers, or a faster burning energy in the form of different polysaccharides, sugars, which are available to fuel soils, and on it goes, and us, and on it goes. So that's a really important thing, to try and extend that for as long as possible. Then what sort of, of great, often more key concern for people is, how are we going to generate energy going into the future? How are we going to store it? What machinery do we have? As I said, a bit of a checklist on that. But then also, what nutrition? Thinking about the nutrition of humans and of the systems and the livestock that we work with. So, with that, extend photosynthesis for the longest period possible. Make the shift to more regenerative energy systems that sequester more carbon than they exhaust. Conduct some energy audits, and again, this is an energy, a pathway of human intent is to be strategic, pragmatic, and incremental, and hopeful, because there is a lot of hope, there is a lot of upside. And one of the things that you will find when you're, and some of you will have already found this by being involved in some really great networks, is that, and being out there in ecosystems which are moving ahead positively, is that they are going really well, and that biodiversity is increasing, and that human health is getting better, and so on. Our own health is getting better, and that's extremely hopeful. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't exposed to that. So again, coming to the checklist, capture and storage, what's your future strategy? And we'll elaborate more on that when we get to that layer. And what implements do you have? So a bit of a checklist, and look at when you last used that implement is a good question, which is if you watch any of the decluttering shows that are on TV or elsewhere, they always talk about when did you last use things as being a framework for when you might, or as a trigger for disposal. So I need to acknowledge all of, oops, hang on, go back, hang on. I need to acknowledge all of those that, so a lot of the images that we just used then are on pretty well, all of the ones in that particular part of the slideshow were from Rex farm planning participants from 2011 to now, and a couple of clients and so on, or ourselves. And so we're really grateful for them for all the work that they've done in working with us and developing and managing all of these agroecologies. And there's a few other people outside of here that have also contributed. So with that, I'll get to the last slide, which is around the task work that we have for this week. And again, up to you. This is not school. This is not, I'm not going to, there's no certificate here or anything like that. So don't get too antsy. It's all about your own outcomes and completely about your own self-determination. You participate however you want to do so. It's completely up to you. You might come and just like I said, watch it all or watch nothing or whatever. It's all up to you. But if you are looking at this week, and it's a good place to sort of get into the program, is to have a read of the climate chapter of the Regrarians Handbook. It's one of the shorter ones, pretty succinct, pretty straightforward. You've got the checklist, which we have read through briefly, but you can read through a bit more clearly, and I'll give you the link for that in a moment. And then Holistic Management, the 3rd edition, part 3, the holistic context. So if you do get a chance to have a read of that, you can. It's available as an ebook. I'd also recommend, if you want something additional to that, is that you can go to the Savory Institute, and they have some of these materials for free. I'll make a note to make a note about that, so that we can. I can put up a link to some of those materials as well. So SIHC online. Okay. Now, any questions that people might have? Okay, so we've gone through all of that. That one. It worked well. Thank you. All right, so any questions anyone's got, just pop them in the Q&A there, and I'll do that. But in the meantime, I'll go straight to the question that Reese had. So go to the workplace and you'll click on Planner, if some of you are not planner members, so you won't have access to this necessarily, because I've made this first one available to, actually, yeah, we'll go, actually, I'll just do it this way. Okay, so Daniel, I don't know whether if you're a current planner member, then you would, and you have access to the planner members group, then in this planner member orientation and access is links to all of the chapters, and those chapters, what you have there, and I won't show them here because I don't want to give away everything. That's why I'm not clicking see more, because we have coupon codes for Regrarians Planner members to use so that they get those chapters for free. Otherwise, if you are not, then go to the Regrarians website, and all of those links are there where you can buy those chapters. Okay, so that's that. I'll just answer live. Answer live. Amanda, welcome. I just wonder about the internet connectivity needed to run Rex templates in Google Earth Pro. It's very pixelated on my screen. Well, generally Google Earth Pro, what you can do is, well, how it works is you will get it going when you, it might take a little bit of time for it to get going and get loaded. Right, so if you've got a rural connection, which a lot of people have, and it's a bit slower, then what you can do is, yep, thanks Kim, I'll get there. Thanks for mentioning that. Is what you can do is get the just let it load, so your farm is on the screen, and then once your farm's on the screen, Google Earth actually caches that, so it stores that higher resolution, because you'll notice in the bottom corner the wheel will spin and it does that, it gets going, right? So it stores that, and then once it's done that, then you can go ahead. Most of it's just going to use the processing power of your computer, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. The Regrarians Platform templates, all they are just the layers that you've got. Now, if you've got any other concern about that, then send me a note in the geography chapter, in the geography layer. So go here to just type in geography and click on there, and then type in the question, and make sure you go at and put Darren. As soon as you put Darren, then I've got another identity. Don't use that one. That's just for admin purposes. So just type in Darren, backspace to me, and then say, hey, I've got this, and post a photo or whatever else it is and let me know. And then that'll notify me, because the notifications will come up in the side here where I've got all of these questions. That's where I live. I see all of these questions that people have got because they've tagged me, and I'll get to it. All right. Right, now this, just make sure I finish that one thing at a time, because I didn't finish Reese's and then Kim's question of where are the, so you all have access to this Google Drive, and this has been linked in the planner members thing. So I cannot stress how important it is, because I have so many questions that people ask where it's clear that they have not read this. I've spent a lot of time putting a lot of links in here, so please, a lot of what you will ask will actually be in one post, in this pinned post of the Regrarian Planner members group, of which many of you are a member. So go in there, have a look at that, click on that link, and it should take you straight to this, a couple of spots in here. So the webinars link, well, it's all in here, in a post in there. And so on. So the participant folders, what you'll find in here, and people have already started doing this, what I would ask you to do, which is a good point to say, in this participant folders, go there and create yourself a folder. So Andrew Peter Bates, now I know Andrew's in Spain, so I'll make a folder for him, ES. He's in, what province is he in? La Donera is in Andalusia. And he's at, he's in a place called El Gastor. All right. And his name's Bates, or Andrew Bates. That's the convention that we use. Sorry, I haven't listed that in there. I don't have everything covered. But I go the country as in 2-word code, what state or province or county you're in, what your locality is, and your name. And that when you do that, that's done. Now with that, we'll just move that directly into that. So if you can start by making yourself a folder, and then once you make the folder, make a copy of this. That's why it says it really clearly here, make a copy. So right click and just go make a copy. It's really simple. Once you do that, right, it says here, copy of. That's what you need to move into there. So Ben, thank you. I'll do that directly for you. Well done. And I'll just swap that into Ben's thing now. So we'll go into Ben's folder, and Ben has now got a copy of the checklist. He can reduce that. So now it's just called the checklist, right? Instead of all of this palaver. Right, it's done. And when Ben goes in there, or I go in there, I can see that Ben's got his checklist, and Ben, I can check out what you've written there, right? So there it all is, okay? So it's pretty simple to do. If you have any trouble with that, then write to me individually, or in the planner, just write a note in here. Just say, hey Daz, I'm having some trouble, or send me a private note through the chat. No worries, Ben, lucky you. Okay, right. All right, the link to the handbook in the, okay, well, maybe Julia, if you can just tag me in a post in that there, then that would be great, or send me a note privately here just to remind me, because I'm pretty close to closing up, because I've got this I've got to go and do a podcast 1 minute, 2 minutes ago. Thanks to that person's scheduling, I didn't even realize. All right, thank you, Daniel. No worries, mate. Yeah, Joseph, those sorts of questions as far as chromatography and all of that sort of thing, yes, I do recommend it, but let's they're the kind of questions that you, like that sort of question, do this, mate. Go straight to 8 soils and write the question here, okay? Because one of the things that we're trying to do here in a peer-to-peer network is to have it so that, you know, don't ask me a question privately, ask a question here. If it's not sensitive, pop it in here, because it richens our whole experience of learning. You know, I'll learn something from this. A lot of other people will learn something from this exchange. So please ask those questions in there if you can. That'd be awesome. Okay. All right. Well, again, Daniel, looks like we'll have to look at that. I'll have to have a look at that to see what's, because there's 3 people who said the same thing about that. I know that earlier this morning when I woke up, it was working, because I had a whole lot of notifications in my email about people who are members who have been able to use it. So there's always some sort of explanation, hopefully. All right. Okay, I'll just see if there's any other questions. Oh, Miguel, hi mate. Nice to hear from you again in Chile. Hope you're all well, and Francesca as well. Yeah, project per person. Yeah, the project per person is not per person. So, as I said, we tried to make that as open as we can. Within reason. I mean, we expect there's a lot of goodwill in us doing that. So we expect, and I'm not pointing it out to you, but in particular, but, you know, don't go and, you know, just invite someone who's outside of this. And you know, there's a bit of fair play there, and we're not going to check up on you. So, but yeah, just try and do that. But yeah, if you can just send through the person's full name. So however that goes, usually depends on you being Spanish culture, it might be 3 names or even 4 names. If you're English culture, it's usually 2 names. So yeah, first and last name, or preferred name, and then the email address. And also we'd like to know what state, province or county you're in. County only for Ireland or the UK, and what country. And they're the three things that we want to know. And then we'll invite them and we'll put them under your membership. Okay. Thank you, Blythe. Was there another one? I didn't get the other one, sorry. What else have we got there? Thank you to Alex. You're an experienced person. You're already on it. Thank you. All right, I think we're good. Well, I hope that's all been of help to people, and I'm glad I was able to get that completely new presentation out of the way. It's not often that you do a completely new presentation, so I'm happy that that went out reasonably well. I can see I've got to do a couple of things to it. But I really, and above all else, I really appreciate all of you joining us and being on this journey to help with whatever your transition is that you're about to undertake. So thank you very much. And if you've got further questions, then please, then that would be great. And thanks to those of you who've done a past one and have agreed that the new platform is a lot better. So thanks very much, and we look forward to catching up with you. All right, away we go. 26 weeks ahead of me. Crazy go. All right, thanks everyone.